Hello out there, all you little lions and lambs. My name's Pastor Rob, and I want to welcome you to another virtual children's church. Find someone to watch this video with you so that you guys can talk about some of the questions that I ask. Grab them and come right back, and we'll get started. Today, we're going to talk about what love is. 2 weeks ago, we talked about how to share the good news of the gospel with our actions through the fruit of the Spirit, and the first fruit of the Spirit was love. Last week, we talked about how Jesus' death and resurrection was a great act of love. But today, let's reference one of the most popular chapters in the Bible to talk exactly about what love is. Grab a Bible and turn to the book of 1 Corinthians in the New Testament, chapter 13. I'll put the words up on the screen because I want you guys to read the whole chapter or listen along as I read it before we talk about what's going on. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, but the greatest of these is love. God gives us so many special gifts, such as the ability to speak well, to have spiritual understanding, or to have a heart for giving to the needy. You know, Paul was trying to teach his brothers and sisters in a church in the city of Corinth about these spiritual gifts, and they began to argue about which one was the greatest. So Paul wrote this letter to them, and specifically chapter 13, he wanted to clear something up. While they were arguing about which of our spiritual gifts from God are the greatest, Paul wanted them to know that if they're not done in love, then the use of all of our spiritual gifts is meaningless. Some people are gifted with the ability to speak God's truth. When these people are filled with love and share about God and what He has done, people open up their hearts and they love to listen, and they're really touched by what they say. But Paul says that without love, these same words are empty and meaningless. And they might as well be a clanging gong or a smashing cymbal. Love makes a big difference. Other people are gifted with spiritual knowledge of who God is and an understanding of His mighty power. When they're filled with this faith, they can tackle all sorts of challenges and be confident and bold in God. The passage in 1 Corinthians 13 says that they can move mountains with this faith. That's like getting over the most inconceivable, most difficult obstacle you could ever imagine. But with faith, they could tell that to get out of the way, and they could walk right through it with God. But without love, all this is meaningless too. We're really starting to see that love is way important for all of these spiritual gifts. God also gives some people a heart to care for those that are in need. They're very giving, whether they're giving their time or their money or their skills, which we also call talents. Like you're talented in something, you can use that to love someone else. Paul says that you could give away everything up to and including your own life. You could give your life for someone. But if you did it without love, then it wouldn't mean anything. Without love, the giving that this person does is not meant to help others or glorify God. It's just meant to make the giver look really good. If all of these powerful and wonderful gifts are nothing without love, well then what is love? The Apostle Paul says love is patient and love is kind. It's not jealous of what other people have. It doesn't brag and it doesn't act proud. Love isn't rude, it isn't selfish, and it is not quick-tempered. It doesn't get angered easily. Love also doesn't keep a list of everything bad or wrong that anyone's ever done to you or that you know of. You know, it says that love does not delight in evil, it's not made happy by evil, but that it rejoices in the truth. And that's what makes it happy. Ultimately, love is outward-facing, love is giving, and love is selfless. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that those describe Jesus, because Jesus is love. Paul explains how temporary some of these gifts are by comparing it to a child growing up. You see, when we're children, before we've grown up into adults, one of the things that we're more concerned about than anything is just what has to do with us. We don't necessarily understand all the other things that are going around in the world. But as we get older, our understanding gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We go from seeing part of the picture to the whole picture. Well, Paul is saying that while here on earth, no matter how old you are, we can only see part of the picture. That's why we might be tempted to think that one gift is better than another gift, better than another gift. But when we're with Christ in heaven, we'll see that love is the only eternal gift. And when we're in heaven, we'll see the whole picture, and we'll have a better, fuller understanding of why love is so important to everything else that we do. Love is so important for us to focus on. Because of all the powerful and magnificent gifts that God gives us, love is eternal. That means that it's beyond time. It never ends, and it never had a beginning. That's why it's the heart of everything that God does and everything that He asks us to do. God is love, and that's why He's called us to focus so much on love and understand it as the most important of all the gifts. Love is really like the umbrella and all of the other things that we do in our families, in our school, outside in our neighborhood. All of those actions need to fall under that umbrella of love. That's how we're going to make the best use of all of our other spiritual gifts, just like God intended. Okay guys, now it's time to see how well you were paying attention by answering some questions. Then, we'll go over some questions that will help us apply this to our lives. Today, we read 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It was a letter by Paul to the church in the city of Corinth. What were the people in the church in Corinth arguing about? The people in the church in Corinth were arguing about which spiritual gift was the best. But they weren't thinking right, and Paul wrote this letter to help set them straight. In verse 1, Paul talked about speaking in the tongues of men and angels. These were people that were gifted in speaking the truth of God. People gifted in speaking the truth of God help to do what? People that speak the truth of God help to teach about Jesus, and they can even speak to those people that normally wouldn't want to hear it, like people with cold or hard hearts toward the gospel. Now here's a silly question with a very important point. If you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without jelly, have you made the sandwich correctly? You know that a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without jelly just isn't right. It's the same way when we speak the truth of God. We cannot do it without love. Otherwise, it's just not right. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without any jelly. That's weird. What can people gifted with spiritual understanding of God do? Sometimes we also call this gift faith. People with the gift of faith, a great spiritual understanding of God, they can face any difficult situation and never fear because they trust in God. But if they do this without love, this moving a giant mountain in their life is just like a cheap magic trick. Here's another silly question that helps us apply this lesson to our lives. If you sit down to watch TV but the power cord is missing, can you get it to turn on without electricity? Of course the TV is not going to turn on without any electricity. And love is like the power cord that connects us with God and the plans that He has for us. So be sure that whatever you're doing, your power cord of love is plugged into Jesus. In verse 3, Paul talked about giving away everything for someone who's in need, even giving your body to be burned. But what does a person gain by giving everything away without love? A person who gives away everything without love gains nothing. Remember, this was not for the other person. Without love, it wasn't others-centered. It was just to make them look good. Paul talked about the dangers of being giving just to make ourselves look good. So is it okay to tell others you shared your sandwich with a friend who forgot his lunch? When we use our spiritual gifts in love, like being generous, it can make us feel very good. And we can want to share that with people. And as long as we're sharing that in a way that highlights Jesus and makes Him the star and doesn't make us the star, of course it's okay to share the things that God is doing through you. But remember, we don't want to do this just to make ourselves look good. That's not loving. While here on earth, we only have part of the picture. That's probably why some of the people in Corinth were arguing about which spiritual gift is the greatest. But what will we have in heaven? In heaven, we will have an understanding that is perfect and true. We'll understand exactly what it means to be loving and why that is so important as we live our lives for Jesus. Can you remember a time when you figured out something you thought was too hard to understand? Take a second and talk with whoever's watching this video with you about what that experience was like. That's what it's going to be like in heaven when we have a perfect and true understanding of how important love is. Of all the gifts that God gives us, which is eternal? Love is eternal, and that's because God and Jesus are love. That's one reason why it's so important for us to focus on love as we become more and more like them. Would you like to share a time when you recently felt loved? Take a second and discuss this with whoever's watching the video with you. God created you for a specific purpose, and He's given you spiritual gifts to live out that purpose. When we use those spiritual gifts to glorify God and help others and draw them closer to Jesus. But love is the thing that fuels all of those gifts. Love should be the thing that motivates us more than anything to be the people that God has called us to be. We can look in the Bible to places like 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we can remind ourselves what love does and what love doesn't do. And then we can pray for the Holy Spirit to help us be loving in all of our interactions and all of our relationships. so that Jesus shines. You see, when we exercise our spiritual gifts and we're motivated by love, it's not about us. It's not about how we look. It's all about how great Jesus looks and how much glory that God gets working through us. We've already said it a couple times. God is love and Jesus is love. So that means that the more we love, the more we become like the people Jesus had called us to be, because we are going to be made in His image. And that happens slowly, a little bit every day, and it won't be complete until we're looking at Him face to face in heaven. But remember, as you love those around you, and as you ask God to show you love in your life, we get transformed into the people that God is calling us to be to accomplish the special purposes He has for us.